Now with Jim Harbaugh in charge, there's a great chance we see some Wolverines follow him to Los Angeles, and that is good news because there are several Michigan defenders that would give a huge boost to the Chargers defense.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 8 seasons, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen today. And to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, as you know, Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator from Michigan, did follow his head coach to the Los Angeles Chargers, and I think it's a no-brainer that we could see several Michigan Wolverines added to this Chargers defense, and I think it is a very, very good thing for that to happen. Also, we're going to talk about the culture. How do we change the culture? How impactful is that culture change going to be to the players on the field? And what kind of offense could we expect? More passing? More running? We're about to talk about it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are afraid that the Chargers are going to be just some super heavy run-dominant team now. And I wouldn't get too carried away with that because, hey, Justin Herbert exists. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. David, it is our Chargers mailbag today, and we got some really, really good questions. Too many good questions. We won't even get to all of them today. But what I want to bring up here is a question about the Chargers and how many of these Michigan Wolverines that are entering this draft could end up on the Chargers. So let's hear what John has for us.
Dan and David, John Griswold here from San Diego. Wondering if now that Harbaugh's in control, if we are going to see some Michigan players coming through the draft to the Chargers to help support this new defense. Wondering if there's some players that are sort of highlighted on maybe your draft board that we should be hopeful that will become Chargers in the 2024 season. Thank you so much.
It's interesting, David, because the Chargers are in a unique situation where they're hiring their head coach straight from college football. So if there was another guy, in most situations, you would maybe potentially think of another team's free agents coming over, kind of like we did with Brandon Staley. But it's different now because the Chargers have to draft some of Jim Harbaugh's guys if they want them. But it seems like a foregone conclusion to me that the Chargers will be taking some Michigan players and specifically some Michigan defenders to come play in Jesse Minter's defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just really makes way too much sense when you consider Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator, and not only that, but pretty much his entire defensive staff is coming with him to the Chargers for the most part. Spare, maybe a couple of position coaches, but I think it's a very important thing. And yeah, there's definitely a couple of Michigan Wolverine defenders that stand out to me. I think the name that gets me the most excited is Mikey Sainristil, the cornerback from the Michigan defense. This guy is fun to watch, man. I mean, he's a little bit smaller in stature, but he plays with an effort and attitude that really just jumps off the screen when you watch him. He can play inside, play outside corner. This guy's a playmaker. He's a guy when he gets the ball in his hands, when he picks off the ball, he can take it to the house. He can take it to the distance. He's a very strong tackler. Man, this guy can bring the hit stick. I mean, I watched a couple of different occasions where he has a one-on-one opportunity to smack a ball carrier, and he runs right through them, and you absolutely got to love that. And I think that's something that's been missing, quite frankly, from the Chargers defense is a slot corner, primarily because that's probably where he's going to play the most, that can really be somebody you can trust a little bit more in run defense, and that, kind of brings some physicality and some playmaking to that position. I think that, honestly, that to me, this guy is exciting, and I hope to get him somewhere probably in the middle rounds, probably third round or fourth.
I don't know if you'd be able to wait that long for him. I mean, he's Dan Brugler's 60th ranked prospect, right? So, I mean, that's in between where the Chargers pick in the second and the third round, towards the end of the second round. So maybe not impossible as a third round pick. He's my favorite out of the group of guys that are going to be picked, in the first 2 days, more than likely, top 100 type of picks, right? According to Dan Brugler, there are 3 Michigan defenders that are ranked in the top 100 in his big board going into the 2024 NFL draft. Mike Sainristil, obviously the guy you're talking about. Chris Jenkins, the defensive lineman, and Junior Colson, the linebacker. The great news is all of those guys fit a need for the Chargers, especially slot cornerback. Jasir Taylor got benched last year as a 6th-round pick. Hard to kind of project what he's going to be in this new defense. But you know what Mike Sainristil is in this defense, which is just a full-blown playmaker. The Chargers need a ton of help in the secondary. Good instincts, isn't afraid to jump a route. Physical player, obviously fits great. He is a smaller player. He'd have to play in the slot at 5'10", 182 pounds. But there's a lot of juice to this kid, and I think he really symbolizes what that Michigan defense is all about. And that's what you're trying to bring with Jesse Minter. But another one of those guys, probably second on my list, would be Junior Colson. Obviously, it's been a while since we've seen the Chargers really have a strength in the linebacking core, right? And for that position to be a strength for them, then you have a guy like Junior Colson, who's Dane Brugler's 39th ranked prospect. Surprised to see him that high, but I think a lot to like about his game.
Yeah, I mean, Junior Colson, 6'3", 247 pounds, so real good size and length for the corner for the middle linebacker position. Strong tackler. I really liked his wingspan. I think that really helped him be a good strong tackler. Like, he has a really good kind of tackle radius where he's able to kind of wrap you up and get you to the ground. And I think he's a pretty good, I would say, form tackler, and he's fairly athletic too. I thought that so. He did pretty good covering running backs and tight ends from the plays that I was able to see him. This is a guy that I feel like can run sideline to sideline, and you need somebody like that in your defense, someone who is physical, who's got length, and can go out there and wrap up a ball carrier and be a sure, secure tackler. I think that's part of what this defense needs.
No surprise from us, right, to lust after some good tackling corners and linebackers, right, given the product that we've seen on the field for the Chargers.
Exactly.
Yeah, very sure tackler, and there's a lot of really bad tacklers in college football, right? Good instincts and coverage, too. Like, I think he's looking for passing lanes. He's not just covering grass, which I like. Gets downhill quickly in the flats, is athletic enough to, cover some tight ends on certain routes and things like that. I like him a lot. I don't know if, second round pick, there's probably some guys I'll like. They're better, but hey, the right price, Junior Colson signed me up for it. And then Chris Jenkins, son of a former NFL defensive lineman, Chris Jenkins, which just makes me feel incredibly old. I see the fit, right? That's the nice thing with Chris Jenkins. I think this is a guy who's a little bit more raw. I think you'd be betting on the athleticism and also just the things that he does well that would fit well in what the defense the Chargers are trying to run.
Yeah, for sure. 6'3", 305 pounds, played defensive tackle at Michigan, and played on the edge quite a bit as well. I think he's a guy that I trust on the edge as far as securing the edge. He has like the physicality and he has the strength to be able to shed blocks and to be able to get ball carriers on the ground. I think from a pass rush perspective, he's very raw in that element. I think there's a lot that needs work in that particular avenue of his game. He needs to put, better combinations together. He needs to build
better plan.
That pass rush repertoire up. Like you said, he needs just a better plan of attack. And I think that's something that, his development will continue at the NFL level. And, the tools are there, the size is there, and the pedigree is definitely there for Chris Jenkins.
And the need for the Chargers is there, too.
It is.
That's the other big thing. I mean, I thought he was disruptive. I think that's the best way I could put it. He does definitely know how to kind of control a gap, lock an offensive lineman out, and be able to shed them to, make an impact in the run game for sure. Pass rush definitely going to take some more time. But I think the big thing here is just getting these guys, you don't have to worry about the scheme fit, right? You don't have to worry about if they're going to understand their assignment. I mean, Michigan, for my money, it was the most disciplined, most fundamentally sound team last year defensively, and I think you're hoping a lot of those talents translate to what the Chargers have right now and the guys that they're going to bring in. I think that's such a big part of it. But getting guys that not only, fit the system, but that are getting the sign-off from Jesse Minter, from Jim Harbaugh, because they know exactly what kind of players they are and have a specific vision for how they can be successful at the NFL level. So I don't think of this as like a nepotism picking your guys, doing it for friendships. I think if they do go and pick, like we expect they will, and probably some undrafted free agents,
it helps everybody
guys from Michigan, I think they're doing it because they know they need that, and they probably don't potentially have that with the guys that they've seen on the roster on the Chargers right now. So I think that's all huge because you're finding the right type of guys. And to me, that speaks about the culture as well. And we have a great question about that, about how does this culture change, how does it happen? How does it impact the results on the field? We're going to talk about Jim Harbaugh changing the culture and what kind of offense this is going to look like coming up after this. First, though, I do need to tell you guys to get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your NBA favorites and your favorite teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Now the All-Star break's over, it's going to be really heating up, and you can get odds on the MVP and so much more, because that is a wide-open race, and you can get some great odds on that right now. Another good thing is March Madness is right around the corner. I mean, one of the best things you could do is getting the day off for the first weekend of March Madness and just having literal basketball and literal action with FanDuel all day, back to back to back to back. There's really nothing like it. It's chaotic, and I love it. And you guys should get on the action. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. David, let's get into some more of these Chargers mailbag questions. Thank you to everyone who hit us up at LockedOnLAC on Twitter. And thank you for the people like John and Atir for hitting up the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. And all the everydayers just for checking us out today. We appreciate you guys and are going to continue bringing you as much off-season content as we possibly can. Let's get to this great question, though, that we have here to start this, David, from JT the Nut, who asks this. How much is the culture change from the coaching going to actually help the players on the field? We talk about the draft and free agency, but the Chargers have always had talent. Will this be the coaching staff do what we've always been waiting for? I say hell yes, by the way. I don't know what the last part is as far as like maybe winning a Super Bowl, but I do love the coaching staff they put together. Obviously, probably a little too soon for Super Bowl talk. Sure. I do want to talk about the culture part of this, Dave, because it's something that gets talked about. It's one of the big kind of things that Jim Harbaugh brings with him, that culture, that identity. But how it kind of translates on the field is a little bit tougher to talk about. But I do think there are very tangible parts of this culture, that what they're bringing, who they're bringing in, and how it's going to affect this team in 2024.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, the beginning of changing that culture started from when Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz had their press conferences where they kind of set out their declaration statements on what they want their team to look like. How they said that don't let the powder blues fool you. We're coming in to mess you up. When you come to play at SoFi, we want to make sure that you know that you played the Chargers and that you felt it after you left. Like those are the type of statements that galvanize, that kind of start to send that message out to say, hey, this is going to be a different regime. This is how things are going to be completely different. We are going to get that physicality because we demand it. And so I think that's where it started, and then it permeates through the people that you bring in, like the strength and conditioning coach, Ben Herbert. And he's the guy that helps kind of get you, mentally and physically prepared to change how you play the game. And because I think, the Chargers have definitely been very much a finesse team, and, you need that message, and then you have to meet that message with action. And I think that's why, the declaration statements and, the people they bring in to kind of bring that message to life is so important. And all of those things are going to help change the culture to where it needs to be.
And I think it starts with the guys that you're bringing in, because that changes now, right? You're valuing different things. You're bringing in guys who are tough. You're bringing in guys that are mentally tough as well, and they're disciplined and are fundamental. But as far as the guys on the team still, right? It starts in the weight room. That's where it starts, right? If you want to be a dominant fourth corner team, if you want to be a team that wins close games, that's where it starts. It starts with Ben Herbert in the weight room. That's where it is, getting these players physically ready to go and physically dominate people, which has not been something the Chargers have had as a calling card since the mid-2000s, right? The next part of it goes to the practice field, getting the most out of these players, giving them what they need to be successful in the practice field, being able to, install everything and install what type of team this is going to be, how these practices are going to be run, how hard it's going to be, giving your all every single day. That's where it goes. Then it translates on the field, right? That's how it trickles down the field. It has to start now. Yeah. And it might not even be a full 1 year process, right? It might even take longer than that. But for some guys, it definitely will. And what it looks like is mental fortitude in the fourth quarter, right? Yeah. That's believing that you can win. Certain parts of it you're not going to get until you win, right?
Yeah.
The biggest thing here, David, to me, accountability. That's what it is. That's what the culture is. It has to be enforced by the staff. The best names don't play. The best players play.
Yeah.
And that's how it has to be.
I
And
agree.
more often than not, we weren't seeing that with previous regimes. There was favorites. People weren't getting told happy birthday and so on and so forth. But it starts with accountability. And I think if you've listened to what the players have said, the guys who have talked about Jim Harbaugh, one of the first things they bring up, accountability. And there wasn't enough accountability on this team. Too many pointing fingers, not enough actual results. And I think that's where it starts. And I think that's how the culture makes you a winning football team. Let's get to the next part here from Derek Higuera, who asks, do you think that with Jim Harbaugh, we see more of a run-first team, or does it become a pass-heavy offense? So I don't know if I can go out on a limb and say it's a pass-heavy offense. It is Greg Roman, who's now the offensive coordinator. I think we're optimistic that it'll look different than what some of the other Greg Roman offenses have looked like, David. But how do you think it plays out?
Yeah, so just for context, last year the Chargers, they threw the ball 59.45% of the time, ran the ball only 41.55% of the time. Michigan's offense, it was almost the complete opposite. It was 40.43% pass, 59.57% run. Now, I don't think it's going to be that same type of mixture here because, like you said earlier, Justin freaking Herbert is the quarterback for the Chargers. So I think you will see a little bit closer to a more balanced mix. I say it's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 55% pass, 45% run. And I think that's going to be something, that's going to help this Chargers offense be more balanced, be more efficient, and kind of, keep the defenders guessing. They truly don't know what's going to come at them.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of it, right? Marrying the run and the pass,
Yes.
as we heard former regimes say. But a lot of this is going to have to do with how well they can actually run the football. How much can you improve your running attack, right? Because if you can't run the football, it's still going to be probably a pretty pass-heavy attack. I would have to hope that you're not just running your head into a brick wall.
We saw that.
I'm still not buying, though, that this is going to be a team that runs the ball more than it throws the ball at all. Like, I think that part of it's overblown. And I think the other big thing here is just, like, they will definitely pass less if they are winning games and not playing from behind and not being in, situations where they have to come back as much as we
Which is not a bad thing.
Right. Yeah, more balance. That's what you're hoping for, a balanced offense. Slightly more passing than running, because you do have Justin Herbert for sure. Yeah. But having a running game that's actually effective and works within your offense is going to be
that would be
huge.
nice.
But it's not going to be a run-heavy, it's not going to be the Ravens of a couple years ago with Greg Roman. I'm so confident, in fact, that if the Chargers run the ball this year with Justin Herbert healthy more than they throw the ball this year, I will fire David from the show. That's how confident I am.
Whoa.
I'm willing to put David's job on the line.
I don't like this here.
Let's get to John Clark, who was asking, what can we expect from Justin Herbert as a runner in Greg Roman's offense? Will we see him tote the ball more or less often in short distance and goal line sets than we did under Staley? It'd be pretty hard to see him do it less often because it's very hard to get the stats for how often someone is scrambling. But as far as designed rushes, I'm sure I could count on one hand how many times the Chargers actually, outside of a quarterback sneak, had designed rushes for Justin Herbert. It hasn't been part of this, David. So what do you think that looks like now in an offense like we just talked about that will be running the ball more, 100%, with Justin Herbert, especially kind of in these sensitive areas?
Well, I think you look at Greg Roman and you kind of see where he's been. He was an offensive coordinator with the Ravens, who has one of the most prolific running quarterbacks in NFL history, and Lamar Jackson. And then, of course, when he was Jim Harbaugh's offensive coordinator, he had Colin Kaepernick, which is also one of the more prolific running quarterbacks in the NFL, at least when he was playing. So I think when you consider that, I do feel like, they are going to use Justin Herbert a little bit more in the running game, and they should. I really feel like this is something that has been sorely missing because it's obvious that he can do it, and he is effective doing it, and he is deceptively fast. Like, he can run away from people, and he has done it. We've seen it on a couple of occasions, but I feel like that's an aspect, an element of his game that has been much underutilized, and I think that will kind of swing a little bit under Greg Roman.
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever seen an offense that has fully unlocked his athleticism and used it to its, greatest effectiveness. I don't think that's, I think, hey, that's a great weapon in red zone and short yard situations. That's like, to me,
6'6", 240.
Cam Newton is probably the best red zone weapon there's ever been, right? Because if you get inside the 5-yard line, what do you do? What do you stop? Who do you pick? It's so hard. Yeah. And like even Josh Allen, right? I think 14, 15 rushing touchdowns last season, right? So what we're saying is that Justin Herbert's going to look a lot more like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen next year. I mean, the thing is here is the eternal thing is how much are you willing to put his health at risk? And I think if you look at how he's gotten injured, right, it hasn't really ever been from scrambling. He does take care of himself when he's outside of the pocket, when he's running the football, and he knows better last year, I think, more than other years, like when is the time to push it, right? When's the time to kind of try to break a tackle or something like that?
And when's the time to slide?
Yeah. Exactly. So weighing the risk of injury, I think also makes it so you're not going to see a super run-heavy attack from Justin Herbert. But I think having an effective running game, having a good running game is going to make him as a runner so much more effective because in the past, if he's running, RPO or if he's even running some sort of read option or something like that, no one's going to bite on the running back because no one's afraid of your running game, right? It becomes a lot more different if teams are actually afraid of when you run the football, which I think most teams are always going to be more afraid when Justin Herbert's throwing the football, but it would like to be a little bit closer than we see it right now. But we do have more of this Chargers mailbag to get into, including what are the positions the Chargers are going to try to address in free agency as opposed to the draft when it comes up, and also picking a Chargers legend to come and help this Jim Harbaugh team out coming up right after this. David, let's continue this Chargers mailbag here, but also thank you to the everydayers for checking out today's show. We always appreciate you guys, and we'll be here, your team, every day as this offseason rolls along. And some great stuff coming up, too. I know Haley Elwood is going to be sitting down with these coordinators, I'm very excited to hear about from Greg Roman and Jesse Minter in their own words how they plan on running things. So we'll definitely recap that when it comes out for sure. And also, biggest needs, stay or go for the offensive side of things, and so much more. But let's get into this Chargers mailbag, including some free agency talk, which will really start to ramp up over these next couple of weeks. But make sure you guys also are checking out the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming YouTube channel, and that is Locked On Sports Today, where you get the local insight that only the local Locked On experts can provide. So make sure to go subscribe to that because it's the first of its kind. But we do have Bolt Up Andrew here who's asking, what position group could you see targeted in free agency rather than the draft for veteran experience? David, I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, I got 3 positions I think that is a possibility for the Chargers to look to address in free agency. And none of these are going to be with premier marquee players because the Chargers just don't got the money. And I mean, they're going to get compliant, but I don't expect there to be a ton of spending cap. So I'm going to go with a veteran defensive lineman. I definitely feel like that's probably something that is attainable for the Chargers. They're going to need bodies. They're going to need people that are familiar with that type of scheme. I think maybe a backup center might be something to look for in free agency, and then a veteran safety.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And or corner. I think maybe something that the Chargers realistically could potentially address in free agency.
Yeah, I like all those. I think center specifically, just because it's like, I mean, center, you're going to have to get a backup no matter what. Definitely. I think as far as starters go, a safety is where I go as far as, how long we know what we want the Chargers to do at the top of the draft, right? Whether it's Malik Neighbors or, Jackson Powers-Johnson, a center, a starting center, right? Trying to find something like that, find a starting tight end. And a tight end, blocking tight end, especially in free agency, I think makes a lot of sense. That's a good one, too. Yeah. Or even potentially Gerald Everett. Is he going to come back? We'll talk about that tomorrow because he obviously is probably the most productive last year of the guys that they have entering free agency. But finding a safety to start alongside Derwin James is hugely important because the backup depth right now is JT Wood. So if you can't get a Alohi Gilman, if he's not back in the fold, you have to find a veteran starting safety, because as we saw with JT Woods and some other young safeties, right, it's not always an easy transition to go to the NFL and find success right away. Sure. You need someone who's going to be able to start for you. I would look to the Ravens. They have a couple of safeties that are entering free agency. The guys like Geno Stone or Deshaun Elliott, that could make a lot of sense too. So that's a big one for me. I think running back too. I think they will draft a running back, but I think they will take a free agent running back too, because you don't know what's going to come to you in the draft. And right now you have Isaiah Spiller. So I would be surprised if a veteran running back, I don't know if it's a Derrick Henry, right? But especially with the Derrick Henrys and the Saquon Barkleys going into free agency, same with Josh Jacobs, same with Austin Eckler. I think that's going to really push down that bottom tier of running backs, at least price-wise. I think there will be a veteran free agent running back that comes in at some point. But let's get to this next question here from Big Daddy E. With the way the NFL offense is played today, and if you could only pick one, which of these former players would you add to the defense for next season? Eric Weddle, Junior Seau, Sean Merriman, Jamal Williams, Quentin Jammer, Luis Castillo. Thanks, guys. Love the show. Quentin Jammer, friend of the show. David, I love these ones. It's always nice to reminisce and think about adding some of the Chargers greats that couldn't get it done to a team that we're hoping can get it done, right, and how much they would help. Who are you going with?
Yeah, well, let me preface this by saying I absolutely love Jamal Williams, and I really, really enjoyed watching him play. He's probably my second option, but
It's hard not
come
to pick
on,
Jamal,
guys.
for sure.
How could you not go with Junior Seau here? I mean, he's a Hall of Famer and a guy that is a do-it-all player at the middle linebacker position. Literally everything. And he did it at such an incredibly high level. The instincts were otherworldly. The physicality was top notch. The coverage was there. The instincts were there. The leadership was there.
Yeah.
Everything that you want to make a football player, Junior Seau possessed it and showcased it on a week in and week out basis for over a decade in the NFL. So it's Junior Seau, and it's really not even close.
I think if you ask any Charger fan of a certain age, what player they could add to any team, it's almost always going to be Junior Seau, even if they're decent linebackers and plays, right? But like, when you have Junior Seau, who was literally the heart and soul of his Chargers team, and also I think the other underrated part of it too, just like you get a huge leader in that locker room. You get, somebody of his magnitude that commands respects.
Has a presence.
Commands that accountability we talked about. He's the easy answer. I would love to see prime Eric Weddle paired up with Derwin James. I think that would be awesome. Right? Not on the list, Antonio Cromartie with the need you have at corner. Quinn Jam, obviously great. But yeah, even with today's NFL, like look what the Ravens linebackers do and how important they are, or even the 49ers linebackers and how important they are to those defenses.
How good they are,
respectively, right? To have somebody like that and to turn that into a major strength like we talked about earlier, right? Like it would be huge for this team. There isn't anything that Junior Seau can't do. And I think the other part of it is just if you want to change the identity, if you want to change the culture, go bring in one of the toughest, most physical players in Chargers history that would fight anyone if he had to, even if his own teammates, right? Even if it was LT. So let's get to one more here we have because a tier called in, want to get to him. Let's see what a tier has for us this week about Quentin Johnston.
Dan, David, my boys love you. This is a tier. David, I disagree with Daniel Papa about QJ. I am really optimistic about QJ this upcoming season. Let's go back to the 98 Broncos Super Bowl winning team. How did they use wide receiver Ed McCaffrey? I believe in my heart Coach Harbaugh is going to use QJ in the same way the Broncos used Ed McCaffrey, and he had a great season that year. Give me your thought if I am wrong. Thank you. Love you, my baby. And you too, Dad. I'd like to hear from you.
Thank you, Atier, for including me there at the end. That's a deep pull. Ed McCaffrey, for those who don't know, is actually Christian McCaffrey's dad, who was a wide receiver in the NFL once upon a time, including on the Super Bowl winning Broncos team. I don't think there's a ton of similarities. Ed McCaffrey's a 6'5" dude who really was known for his toughness. He was known for his ability to catch the ball over the middle, was known for his kind of deceptive speed a little bit, which maybe that kind of reminds you of Quentin Johnston, but also crazy contested catches and things like that. But I do think, David, the point here is using Quentin Johnston differently. And I know Daniel Whopper, when he was on the show, he said, hey, I don't know if it's a usage thing. I just don't know if Quentin Johnston has like the fine nuances of the game to be able to play a just regular wide receiver without being kind of a gadget player only, right? Because they did try some of those things. And I do think we could both agree that, hey, Quentin Johnston, for everything, that he failed to do, I don't know if he ever was really put in those, positions that would have helped his transition into the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always kind of envisioned a Cordarrelle Patterson style of play for Quentin Johnston, getting the ball in his hands quickly, the quick slants, the drags, the handoffs, the comebacks, the quick hitters. The one thing that does ring true is that Quentin Johnston's very hard to tackle. It's the guy that took 2 or 3 guys to try to bring him down, and it almost always felt like the ref was blowing the whistle on the play. So I'd like to see him utilized a little bit more in that fashion. Hope that he takes the time in this offseason to really work on the hands, strengthen that part of his game, work on the nuances of running routes, and then come back ready to take that sophomore leap.
Yeah, and the thing is I do think they can use him more effectively. The problem I struggle with is, can he be a legitimate, wide receiver too, where it's not a little bit gimmicky and be just a regular traditional wide receiver? Right? I don't know that's still very much on the table. Can they use him better? Yes. Ed McCaffrey also had 0 carries in that season for 0 yards. So I would like to see him get some handoffs. And I do think when you're running the, heavy running scheme, power formations, and you're running jet sweeps and things like that off of that, that helps a guy like Quentin Johnson,
Yeah.
and maybe a way that Kellen Moore's offense really didn't. So I do think there's some parts of Greg Roman's offense, if they can use him a little bit differently, that he can find more success. The problem is I just don't think you can count on it at all. Like, I don't think you can go into the season with two guys who have been banged up a lot in Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer and feel good about Quentin Johnson potentially having to step up and be a wide receiver one at this point. I just don't know if we saw anything that could lead us to feel confident in that. So I don't think you can use him in any argument of not needing to add more to that position this year, given Keenan Allen's age, given the uncertainty around Josh Palmer. So I hope he can be more successful. I don't think that stops them from having to add to that room, and I think they need to. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow, probably with stay or go with the biggest offensive potential, free agents. And not only that, but guys like Mike Williams and Keenan Allen that still have a chance to potentially not be on this team in 2024. So to make sure you guys don't miss it, go subscribe and follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. Thank you to everyone who hit us up today on the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 and on Twitter at LockedOnLAC. You can also always slide into David's Twitter at DroTalkSD into those DMs if you have a question, or you can follow me at Dan Talk Sports. You can also find us at Locked On Chargers on Instagram and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page as well. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow with Stay or Go, discussing the percentage chances that the Chargers' internal free agents coming up and some of the guys that could potentially get cut will be on the roster in 2024. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.